Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense at all.
All right. Sorry, folks. I don't know what happened. Technology is great when it works well and not so great when it doesn't. So I apologize. Thanks for your patience. And we'll keep going here. So I'm going to come back to my sharing here real quickly, and then we'll open it up. Expect non-closure. No decisions will be made tonight. The proposal is likely to change before the board votes in January. As was stated earlier, we have 3 more sessions in December with the Guiding Coalition to really take the feedback from you all and surveys and everything that comes in to adjust, modify, adapt. So we ask you to stay engaged, and we'll continue to see and use feedback throughout the process. So there is, in the discussion process, it would really be helpful. We're going to start with Q&A and then have feedback. It's really helpful if you add things to the chat. David will help me monitor that. It's a lot better or easier way for us to get the questions instead of having people mute and unmute all the time. If you cannot, however, see the chat, just state your name and topic and school of interest, unmute yourself and do that. And we'll try to call on different schools and topics until we get through everyone who wants to speak or share an idea. Chat works really well for us if we can prioritize them. If you can, again, please put your topic in the chat. So we'll start there. If you can just start adding questions into the chat. And I see people already starting to add, so thank you for doing so. And the first one, obviously, we did get kicked out, but hopefully we're back in. It looks like we're back up to 28 participants. So why are you considering a proposal that puts Bridger and Franklin at over 100% enrollment? My understanding, and maybe David also has some information. I know that this is phase 1. I know that in phase 2 and phase 3, we're working on really trying to address the over enrollment in the high schools, and it's not as easy just in the first phase. But David, did you have any other things you would add to that?
I think that's right. It's because of the phases, and also I believe there's some suspicion that what is now seen as over enrollment would be at Franklin may be alleviated somewhat once Madison is modernized and reopened.
All right. Next question here. I'm sorry. Lots of sweeping changes to Glencoe feeders without any Glencoe families and students in the discussion in phase 1. So that's certainly something we need to consider and figure out why that hasn't happened, and we'll address that. When will elementary schools shift? So as was in the pink box, and those specifically for K-8s that were are being converted to K-5s going to Kellogg. That's the first full phase. So it would be only those schools going to Kellogg, and I want to make sure I name them right. Roy, do you have those off in a?
Yeah, the Kellogg feeders would be Arleta, Creston, Lint, and Marysville. Michael.
Right, 4 schools. And then in fall 2022, the next would be for Harrison Park. So that's when Clark would be converted in this proposal. And then Bridger as a Chinese DLIO school would then also go in there. And there's one other shift, right? David, is there another one? Here, I need to pull up.
Yeah, my apologies. We have we were lucky, a couple of the rooms are not back in, so we're trying to get them back in.
Yeah. So then if you look at this, it's Bridger, Atkinson, and Clark would be in 2022. That would be the second part of this phase one. The Harrison Park, the reason why that's in 2022 is because part of the transforming Harrison Park back into a middle school. It was originally a middle school called Binsmead. But if we were going to convert it back into a middle school, that takes some work. You can't just open it up and do that. So that's why it's delayed till 2022. Is there another building available that could hold CSS's nearly 500 students? I think that is certainly one of the things that needs to be answered and figuring that out. I don't have that answer myself. And I know that takes a lot of work with facilities and identifying that. So I don't have an answer tonight unless you do, David.
I do not. I think, and I think just generally, right, because and Michael being on the instructional side and knowing so much about DLI and curriculum, he has an even more, definitely a more robust understanding of some of the behinds on this. I think by and large, we're going to try and answer whatever questions we can this evening, and we can certainly get answers to you for those that we don't have answers for. I think any concerns that you have, right? Any concerns, any things that you want to see, anything that you're seeing in there that you don't want to see, and comments like that. So definitely we can answer questions, but in the cases that we can, any other, whatever your feedback is, we would also love to hear tonight.
Great. Thanks, David. So there is a question about research discussing the benefits of all immersion schools or strands being in one school as opposed to a strand within a neighborhood. I don't. I'm not. If it actually mute. Let's see. Maybe I can actually. It helps. So in terms of, there isn't necessarily that I'm aware of research that talks about all school immersion compared to what we call a co-located program or a DLI program located with what we call an English scholars program where they teach all the content, a normal neighborhood English only program. But there are some definite discussions and sort of instructional focus, and in terms of having for professional development for our teachers and for a principal and for building a whole school culture that is bilingual and biliterate, that actually there's some strong evidence about when we've been able to move to schools that we currently have. Regular is one in Northeast, and also Japanese at Richmond, where they able to have curriculum and professional development, everything focused. That ability to have a focus really facilitates some stronger implementation. And it also doesn't create a sort of a dichotomy within the school or a difference. So I can't say that there is a research base on that. I don't know that anybody has conducted that research, but we can certainly take that back as well, as David said, where we certainly want to take these, all this will be documented. There's another question here about create very white schools. Racial equity is a focus. Why would you look at a proposal that creates less diversity at the inner Southeast schools? So certainly this is one of the major, I think, points of tension and discussion around gentrification of school, communities and schools, and how we sort of balance all that work out. And I think we'll continue to look at those, that data, and how do we create, how do we demographically create schools with diversity. Our communities are becoming more segregated and more gentrified, and that challenges us for sure. Why does this proposal cram Spanish and Mandarin DLI in buildings that will require the use of portables and then leave Atkinson and Woodstock? So I'm not as, in terms of the actual specifics about how crowded and so forth, I don't know. Once we take out the 6-8 components. There's supposedly, according to the data, it's supposed to create enough space where those programs can be facilitated with all the 3 strands that would be involved, or the 4 strands. The underutilization is a part of what has to be addressed in terms of those particular schools. There is a boundary adjustment that'll happen, that would need to happen to make sure Atkinson and Woodstocks are utilized greater. So I don't know, David, do you have anything more that you would say around those?
I don't think so, Michael. I think you captured most of what I would. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, why is DLI in being included in phase 1 when directive is to enroll Kellogg Middle School and identify the comprehensive middle schools? I think if you step back to actually one of the major goals for coming from our board, our school board, was to really address some of the co-location issues and tensions that happen. In other words, 2 different educational programs being together in the same building. So I think obviously in trying to open Kellogg, that's what has to happen. There's an opportunity to try to address some of the other concerns or challenges that we may face in our system. And I know that was part of what the coalition really grappled with. So it's a little hard to just open Kellogg without having some impact on other and have decisions that are not going to be impacting other aspects of our system and programs that exist in current schools. So I know in this first phase, this first decision is about Kellogg and Harrison Park. I think there's going to be a closer look as we get past that initial decision about confirming where immersion programs should be and the feeder patterns and so forth. But and this is a proposal, nothing's decided. This is what it's looking at. Co-location as a detriment seems to be a premise of this plan. I understand that schools and families feel that way anecdotally, but does your survey data actually bear out the supposed detriments of co-locating DLI programs? So this is a complex issue, and I, as someone that's been heavily involved with that, I don't think it's a truly black and white issue. Co-location can have some detriments. It's not a given. We often talk about co-location when there are examples, and I think that was shared by 2 of our presenters, 2 of our coalition members tonight, where actually co-location was a positive, and there were some good aspects to that. And I think that, especially when we have a program where it's what we call a balanced program, where there's like at least 2 strands together of each, where you can balance that and make that happen. There tends to be less problems of issues around resources or negative impacts or haves and have-nots within a school community. And then there are some times where it's unbalanced, and in particular, maybe where demographically speaking, the English scholar side has less resources, or there's demographics that set up more mobility and families going in and out, and can have high rises in numbers or low numbers. So it's not a pure, just like it's good or bad. There's times where it can be fine and work well. And then there are times where it can be detrimental in terms of the resources. We had some particular, if we step aside from Southeast and look in Northeast between 2 schools called Rigler and Scott, we actually got to a point in Rigler where the size of the smallness of the English Scholars Program was draining resources because there were such small numbers and we can't mix the kids, that it was really detrimental in the services we could provide to those kids in terms of special ed or instructional coaching and all kinds of things, because everything had to go into supporting a classroom teacher. So there's a lot of complexities to it. Not always easy, but certainly has some challenges, but it's not always that case. So.
Hey, Michael, I just wanted just to not to skip ahead, although
Yep.
that's what I'm doing, but
Yep.
just because there's a question from Dana around Zooms for those non-English speakers. So
Right.
I wonder if that Somali room may be one that's still experiencing some technical difficulties, and
Yeah,
that may have something to do with the low attendance there. And what we can tell you also is that we have had focus groups for speakers of our supported languages in the preceding days, and including Michael participating in a couple of them, including last evening, right? Tuesday evening, right, Michael?
both Chinese on Tuesday evening and Somali last night.
Okay. So we just want to let folks know that I don't think anyone would sit here and say that the district is yet where we need to be, but we are really making every effort that we can to make sure that as many folks across our district, as far as different cultures, different languages, different schools, different neighborhoods, feel comfortable, feel reached, feel welcomed, and feel engaged by this process.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. There is a question here that comes up often about transportation. It hasn't really been discussed. I think that's an accurate statement. We certainly would have, transportation has to be part of the solution and part of the challenge, things that we have to work on. Obviously right now there's a proposal, then there's a lot of things to make the proposal work that would need to be detailed out and proposed and shared with the board. Transportation would be one of those, absolutely. And there are other, how do you move, student or teachers and all those kinds of things between programs if they shift to a different school and so forth. Let's see, there's a question about something. I'm very worried that removing the co-located DLI program is being suggested to be for the benefit of the ESL families, but at least at the Woodstock school meeting, our Mandarin speaking families were very vocal against ending the co-locating. Yeah, we heard that very clearly from many families and in surveys as well. I think that certainly one of the things that the coalition was grappling with is, where do we put a program that actually has a way of serving, is actually the best educational program that serving our ESL, our emergent bilingual families, and has really the best academic outcomes for them, and how do we prioritize access for them? One of those is location. Transportation could be a part of that solution. So I think those are things that we still need to grapple with. And I know there are a lot of concerns about segregation and how do we, and that comes back to that gentrification question as well. Those are certainly things that we certainly want to hear from all of you, and as we go through and grappling with that. DLI does have one advantage in the sense that it is set up to be actually, the reason why it's a powerful educational model is that it brings together both, both our native English speakers as well as our native speakers of the partner languages. So hopefully that's a way to bring those together.
Michael, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I missed it. Are we doing a Q&A first and then going into discussion, or are we going to have a chance to talk as a group?
Yeah, we were taking questions in the chat. And so one of the things when we have 46 people, it's hard to have a big discussion. So we were trying to take questions and comments through the chat first.
But are we going to have, because right now there seems to be a lot of back and forth on the chat, and I just feel like it'd be a little more robust if we could have a discussion.
Yeah, I guess, so we can certainly do that. I don't want to also miss out on some of the questions that are coming in through the chat. So maybe we can balance those two. So did you have and I know that Jade, you've had some questions in here already. Do you have, we could certainly, I'd like to see if we can step through some of these.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific, but I just definitely don't want to miss out on the chance for us to talk as a group and hear each other's concerns and get that on record as well.
We were starting with Q&A,
Okay.
which is what I started with, and then we're going to take feedback. let's see, David, how are we doing on time? Are we?
We're in pretty good shape, Michael. We're at about 7:12 right now. So I think if folks want to, this is meant for you guys to share what you want to share. I think, as Michael said, we're trying to make sure with a bigger group that everyone was heard with the Q&A, with the chat. I think people can continue to put comments in the chat. And then Michael, if you're comfortable with it, we can kind of open it up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of these questions that are tied to the co-location and going back and forth. I see the question around capacity. Obviously that's something that data we need to look carefully at. And Bridger is saying that can only handle 2 strands, although it already handles 3 strands currently in a K8 model for 2 of Spanish and 1 of the neighborhood. So I believe it is 3 strands. It's very capable of handling it according to what we understand, but let's confirm those things. I think that's what David and I are here to make sure we take that back and we can answer and confirm that as well. I think, at this point, I see some going back and forth. If we could do this, I'm happy to take some comments or questions verbally if we want to do that. I also, maybe David, if you can help me sort of feed through, because there's 60 new messages. It's really hard to answer all those questions. So, maybe let's take Jade's, invitation so we can open it up a little bit. It can't have everybody talking at once, obviously. So maybe, do you have ability to raise your hand? Let me see. I know in Google Meets, we can always do this.
I believe in reactions, you can raise your hand.
Yeah.
Is it in the reactions?
Or you can do a thumbs up.
If you click on the participant box down below, you'll be able to raise your hand that way.
Okay.
Do you see it? I just raised my hand.
Let's see here.
And I think.
Yeah, David, are you seeing it?
I'm just gonna do that. So I just did a heart, and you can do that and clap. All I have is a few emojis in mind, but I think if somebody just puts an emoji in there, as we'll know that they are looking to ask a question.
If you want to see the hand raising, you have to have the participant box open on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
You can see the raise hand.
Oh, I see it. Thank you. Got it. I'm so used to using Google Meets. My apologies. I'm not as Zoom proficient. So why don't we start with, I'll just work down these. Elaine from Woodstock. Would you?
And before Elaine starts, and I'm so sorry, Elaine, real quick, I just want to let everyone know, we're capturing all of the chat questions and comments. So if one doesn't seem to be answered or whatever, we are bringing those back, all of them in total. So just wanted everyone to know that.
I'd also like to point out that all of us can save the chat by those little 3 dots in the lower corner, right where you enter your thing, and you just hit save file, and you will have a copy of this transcript.
Yep.
Great. All right. So Elaine, you took down your hand, or?
I did. Surprisingly enough, I don't have a question at this time.
Okay. Well, if it comes back up,
I was merely demonstrating the raise hand feature. I'm really just trying to take all of this in and trying to learn all the advantages and disadvantages, because I feel like this all came really quickly.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's going to happen really quickly. And I would probably be supported by my fellow community members that it feels like this, isn't the best time to have this conversation, given there's so many other things happening in the world, but I understand there are reasons behind it. So I'm truly just here to listen and learn from your answers and get more answers, so to speak.
Well, thank you, Elaine. And if you do come up with a question, please raise your hand again. And thanks for being a model and showing us how to do it. So I'm going to go to the next one I see, although it looks like it disappeared. So Howard or Howie.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Hi, Michael. Yeah, I understand with opening Kellogg and the macro features of changing several K through 8 to K through 5 and 6 through 8. Specifically, I'm just very concerned about Woodstock. It has been the a great example of a successful English scholars and a MIP program. So number one, I would like to express a lot of parents' views that we would love that not to be touched. Number two, looking at proposal 10, utilization currently at 87% would go down to 38% if that was moved. And I'm just wondering what, that goes against, it seems, all the goals. Are you planning, would the district move other people in there? Would they sell that to a real estate developer? I mean, because 38%, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, just wondering what, while I can recognize the need for the middle school and high school changes, I'm just wondering what the urgency is to mess with what seems like an ideal program.
Thanks, Howie. So I think your question about the utilization it came up in the chat as well. And I think we definitely need to come back with, the people with the data and make sure we understand what would happen or what would be proposed to utilize. Obviously, having a building it's sitting at 38% is counter to what we would want to have as an outcome, because it's about balancing enrollment for sure. And I think, and we hear your point, and I think I heard you say that Tuesday night, I think it was Tuesday night, no, yeah, Tuesday night as well. I know I don't understand Chinese quite well, but I did hear your points about, and we saved that chat, and we're bringing that, sharing that feedback. We shared that feedback with the coalition as well about, I think there are ideas about, Woodstock being a balance, because Woodstock is currently a balanced co-located. I think there were some thoughts about how do we, if there's an advantage in certainly from an instructional and cohesiveness to having one school that has that singular focus and have some, again, it's that sort of balance. Sometimes there's some real advantages to co-located, and then sometimes there's real advantages to having a singular focused all immersion school as well. So I'm going to ask Woodstock Candy.
Hi, I am a little bit concerned. I'm just kind of being brought in on this. I'm one of the, I guess English scholar, of Woodstock parents, and I kind of just becoming privy to this. There hasn't been much support. At least I haven't seen much or heard much as a neighborhood / English scholar person, but I haven't seen any alternatives. This plan is concerning because we're seeing this one plan that is, again, like not great about diversifying, and displacing people and a group that is generally speaking people of color, which is very concerning. And where are the alternatives? Like if this is just something that's being floated around, what are the alternatives that are being floated around? Because right now, that's what's concerning me, is this doesn't seem like something where we're discussing options. It seems like here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to discuss it and see how upset everybody's going to get, and that's not okay. There should be other models, and there should be models that take into account these, various issues that are coming up. Because for me, it's just incredibly upsetting, to think about in this very white city, this happening where, these language schools are being lumped into essentially one building each.
And Candy, I'm sorry, did you say you're in the English scholar side or?
Yes, my kids are in the neighborhood program or English scholar. I'm just learning that term, and I realized how terrible the term neighborhood is now when I hear it, because it's like, oh my gosh, that's so bad. But yes, the English scholar, and it's upsetting to me. It's upsetting to me because I enjoy the diversity of it, and just upsetting to me as a parent and a human being who wants to see, diversifying and not something that is essentially pigeonholing and lumping, these programs into these corners.
Thank you, Candy. And then the coalition has, obviously this came across as proposal 10. They've been looking at a lot of different options. I know that part of bringing something was not to have If they had 2, then people felt like they had to make a choice, but rather get reactions to this and then go back and revise and consider other options. So I think your feedback is well taken, and appreciate you sharing that. The English scholar, just so folks are aware why we're using that terminology, is English only is sometimes how it's referred to, but English only has some negative, especially if you're in parts of our country or California where English only has even a very strong sort of negative thing towards multilingualism. So we try to use English scholars. And we also neighborhood, because some of our programs actually in DLI are very neighborhood based. For example, Harrison Park is almost 100% neighborhood based. It's intentional that way. So we just, those terms don't work as well. So that's why we're saying English scholars. So thank you, Candy, for using that. And thanks for your feedback. Amelia, it looks like you now have a question.
Yeah, sorry, I got distracted before and didn't want to start before I had
You're
things
good. You're totally
formulated.
good. And I love the cookie.
It's better than the ice cream I was going to offer before dinner so that we could participate in the Zoom. So I have concerns about, and I think it goes beyond just like the optics of equity, that the Sellwood brand, so I'm at Woodstock, but the Sellwood area being some of the most wealthy areas of Southeast are not even touched at all in any of the scenarios. That coupled with this idea of moving our most diverse programs to farther, farther into the periphery of the city and whitewashing the city, the schools and inner Southeast is really concerning. I went to the Woodstock family meeting that was internal, going in with this mindset of assuming that the English Scholars Program families would be excited about this because maybe the co-located program was actually bad for them and I was unaware, and was thankfully surprised to hear from family or community members like Candy that that was not the case and that everybody really did appreciate the co-location. And it shows that all of our students, whether you're learning a language or not, can learn from the diversity of culture. It just really doesn't sit well to be segregating people, knowing that that's not the preference of the English language learners.
Thank you, Amelia. I appreciate you sharing that.
These are the cookies.
Do you know anything about the Sellwood, like why Sellwood it has been left out?
I'm not sure I have all the details on that. I can say a couple of things. One thing, and maybe David has more, but the one thing is that obviously the biggest impetus right this in the moment in time is that we have a brand new $60 million publicly funded middle school opening at Kellogg, and the idea, and that's like that is like a non-negotiable. We have to open that building, so we have, which means we have to decide the feeder patterns. Who are the family kids that are going to go there? So obviously, I think from the coalition standpoint that was the charge, was to really hone in and focus in on that. Obviously that decision and the idea of moving from K-8s to middle schools was another driver. As someone who's looked across the system, I can tell you K-8s, if they're funded well and they're really big enough, then you can do some really robust middle school programming. But when they're not, which is the case with a lot of our K-8s, they're too small, they get really skinny. And the offerings, for example, like we can do at Sellwood or a Mount Tabor or a West Sylvan are much more limited. And so I think that is seen as one of the inequities that needed to be addressed in the process. So I know that the focus has been on Kellogg and then secondary with Harrison Park to address that K-8 moving back to an elementary middle school configuration, that's for an educational and equitable, that we do have data very clearly the inequities that was causing, especially for a lot of our kids of color and kids of poverty, where some of our skinniest K-8s were or have been or are. So those are the drivers. I believe that in the whole process, we're supposed to look across the whole city. I don't know, I can't speak to if there's going to be a phase where we go into, closer inner Southeast. I don't, David, would you have anything you would add to that?
I don't think so, Michael. No. I do think it would probably not, and then you can finish that thought. I know there would, just to let everyone know, and while we're getting this very good and thorough feedback, and I know there's more to come, there were some themes that may be helpful, and we can maybe get to those in a little bit, just from the guiding coalition of just sort of thread throughs that came about through the discussions over the last several weeks of meetings. So we'll share those. But no, Michael, I don't have anything more to share about that particular question.
Well, thanks, Amelia. I know that and actually there were guiding, just to be transparent, there were guiding coalition members that have raised that issue as well. David and I are not voting members of that. We're there to facilitate, but I would say that some of your other parents and community members have also expressed that, not necessarily Selwood per se, but there were other parts of inner Southeast, whether or not we were going to talk about those inequities that may occur in those, or are there areas we need to address there? So thank you for that. Well, certainly all this is recorded, we're going to share. I'm looking at hands raised. I'm going to pick Jade because I don't think Jade, I know Jade, you spoke, but you didn't get an opportunity to share questions. So if you could.
Thank you, Michael. I wanted to address the elephant in the room of segregation and how a lot of our Chinese families and Latinx families are feeling like, as we make these single school programs, that it has the optics of systemic racism, pushing our families out to outer Southeast and essentially keeping them there and limiting their upward mobility. And I'd like to ask if, just open up that conversation and ask if anyone has really talked about that, because I've been to the Southeast Coalition workshops and hearing them talk about tensions and what tensions are involved right now. And not once have they ever mentioned the tension of the systemic racism and the perception of segregation.
So you're opening it up for everybody. So we certainly can open it. Thanks for sharing that. I do want to tell you that, and I have been at every one of them, I do know that this has become certainly a big topic about the segregation and whether we're isolating or moving our people of color into outer Southeast. I do know that that's been a big discussion and tension and discussion. And I know there's engagement, and I think we're hearing that a lot. And we heard that even in our language specific groups Tuesday night as well, and with our Chinese speaking community, I know with our Spanish speaking community as well. So are there other opinions or ideas and different perspectives that as Jade has opened up the conversation? I'm
sorry, I'm going to add then what has been discussed then, and how is PPS going to address that? Because it seems that in the Southeast Coalition workshops that the voices always get dismissed, or what I've perceived is dismissed, and it's just not a topic anyone wants to touch.
Well, I do know that looking at the data in terms of actual demographics and looking at those, and I know that they're looking at socioeconomic as well as racial. And I think then there's, so that's some of the data that I think we got to come back to and revisit and see how this, and examine that closer and unpack that. I also know that there are some differing, sometimes there are some differing opinions around that in terms of, and I think this is one of those things where we talk about even in DLI about whether whether the program is a mitigator of gentrification or a catalyst of gentrification, because they can do both things. We know that we have a priority in serving our emergent bilingual families, and equitable access to that has been a part of that discussion. And so do we put our programs closer to where our families that priority service in terms of educational outcomes? Is that something where we should put it? Or could DLI also be, and the flip side, and I will tell you that, like, for example, in Dallas public schools, they actually they're working towards using DLI as a way to the desegregation of their schools, or is they're using DLI that way. And so I know that that's also, do you put a program further in and have people, our students of color and our emergent bilingual families have to move and go to those schools, or do you go the other way? And I think those are dilemmas. That's I think I don't think there's a clear-cut answer.
Michael, can I
whatever.
interrupt?
Yeah.
Thank you. Jay, that's a fantastic question. As a coalition member, that's a question that I've been asking constantly. And actually on Tuesday morning, we were able to get some data specifically from Jed, who is their flow person, that specifically states that for the Spanish DLI program at Atkinson, only 8 families of the whole program live within 1 mile of Lentz. And for Bridger, only 12 families live within 1 mile of Lentz. That means that most of the family live outside of that 1 mile radius of Lentz. I'm sure that if we ask Jed, it took about 3 weeks to get that info, but if we ask Jed, he could probably get that information as well for Chinese immersion families. And thank you for raising that question, Jade. That's a question that I've been constantly wondering and asking over and over again. I appreciate it a lot.
Thanks, Martha, for bringing that. I didn't realize you'd gotten that data on Tuesday morning. I'm working on a whole bunch of other things, but in the instructional components, but I appreciate you bringing that voice in as well. So are there others that we'd like to play into that conversation? Because I think Jade intended that to be opened up to everybody, right, Jade? Okay.
I would like to mention something. So my son's in the Mandarin immersion program as a neighborhood student. And if the program moves, I will likely drop out of the program because I won't be able to facilitate the move of transporting him to the next school. And from talking to a lot of my neighbors who are also in the program, a lot of them feel the same way. So let's say hypothetically, if a lot of in-neighborhood program parents and families drop out, how are you going to replace those students? And then I feel like the success of it is having that 50-50 student population to help with the English portion as well as the Chinese. And I just feel like if it's moved, a lot of the neighborhood parents, the English speakers, are going to quit the program.
So I think that might be one of those things where we need to survey and really get a sense of that. Again, I don't know if this is what they actually been put forward as a proposal. This is right now what's on the table, but certainly that surveying and figuring out, where families are. And yeah, a two-way, as you mentioned, 50, just to be clear about terms, we usually talk about our programs where we have, and that's considered the best educational program for our emergent bilinguals, where we have what's called a two-way. So there's about half and half, native speakers of the partner language, native speakers of English. And that is a critical aspect of the program, for sure, that having that balance and learning from each other and those things are really a critical component to it. So it's something we definitely need to consider as we dive deeper into this and take the feedback that we're hearing tonight and from through surveys and other ways as well. So
I just want to mention, Michael, I think in the time that we have left, which is limited, and I wanted to mention that I believe Deputy Superintendent Hertz has joined us, as well as our special advisor to the superintendent on racial equity and social justice. Daniel Ledesma is in the room, or was in the room. With the limited amount of time, knowing that Michael certainly can answer some of the questions, but if we can get as many questions and comments from you in the time that we have remaining, so that we can take that to the larger group, let's do that. And so there may be some things that we can answer right now, but by and large, let's just try and receive from you so that we can get as much feedback from you in that finite time period.
See comments saying will we really take, Michael and David really take the feedback, and just being a part of the coalition, I really have seen the comments, the surveys, all of it taken back and the scenarios adjusted. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Misha Plotsky. I'm the principal at Creative Science. And that has just been my observation as a member of the coalition, is the scenarios, and if you've been following along, the scenarios have changed. I think there's been almost 20 scenarios. So they do take the feedback that you're putting in the chat or sharing. So I just wanted that to not just get glazed over. Just so if you do have input, just to make sure that you're writing it in or sharing it or filling out the surveys or forms. That's really important.
Thanks. Sure. Other thoughts, questions? And you can certainly, as David said, you can put them in the chat. That all gets recorded as we've said, and also this verbally. They get compiled and we look at themes and we look at reoccurring questions and concerns that we need to address. Other thoughts or questions?
Hi, Michael. Can I speak for a second? Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I would just like to know, I mean, I know that you presented a slide, a Google slide at one of the meetings where it identified sort of the different types of co-location models for DLI, and it listed out, you know, where there could be challenges. And definitely the one that seemed to be problematic was when you had a single strand of neighborhood. And there are 2 schools in that situation in Southeast, Bridger and Lent. And so were you hearing anything from Atkinson DLI teachers or Woodstock DLI teachers that there was a problem with their co-location model?
Not from the teachers, and you're right. I mean, so just so everybody knows, we call that an unbalanced co-location, where, and in particular tends to be a bigger challenge when there's, and we've heard this from some of our Bridger families, where the neighborhood is 1 strand and there's 2 DLI, or Spanish DLI, and that we've certainly heard some opinions and concerns by not teachers, but by parents or families. I have not heard that from the teachers at Atkinson nor at Woodstock. No, certainly I think our instructional leaders certainly have said it would be the ability to be able to have an instructional focus and be able to do professional development. And that's not just those schools, but schools across the district where there is that imbalance, or the ability to be able to have a focus when you do curriculum and instruction work, and therefore the ability to do that impacts their ability in terms of education of children. So I think that's the concern that they bring forward, or we bring forward. So
this is administrators kind of basically saying that teachers' input is not as valid as administrative input, because I feel like we need to listen to what teachers feel works well. And also, I would say I was PTA president at Atkinson, and I understand the challenges of having 2 programs in a school. I mean, we have 3 programs. We have an ISC program in our building as well, which is an intensive skills classroom focus for SPED students. And I actually really love the diversity at our school, and a lot of our families do. And we appreciate what every program brings to our school. And there are definitely always people that feel challenged by that diversity. And I think that's a good thing. I think that is a really good thing. And I think people need that. I think we need to have people who struggle with that, because if you just always separate everybody out into separate schools, you have a school for, all the different communities of color, that's not going to lead us to a better society where anybody knows how to share space or get along with each other or learn from each other. That's not a reason to move a program out of a school.
All right. Thank you, Carissa. And listening to teachers, I don't know if we've gotten that feedback. There was a teacher listening sessions that were happening. I don't know if I've seen that information, but certainly our teachers are critical players, are parts of this whole thing. And they're actually the core of a business, our work, right? I think April, I see April's hand up, or Harmony, did you have something?
Sure, I'll say something. Just to piggyback off of Carissa, isn't there, I just feel like there has to be more alternatives than just closing co-located programs in terms of supporting our DLI programs and our neighborhood single strands. We can hire TOSAs that are focused on mentoring those single strand teachers, that are focused on providing collaborative meetings and professional development. We can provide more days for teachers to go observe other DLI or other neighborhood teachers at other schools. It seems like a little bit of a failure of imagination to just say we should stop doing co-location when there are lots of opportunities and lots of solutions. As we've discovered in the middle of a pandemic, when we're all doing comprehensive distance learning, we can do a lot of things when we're not in the same building together. And I think up until this point, PBS has really done a disservice to those programs by not trying harder, not doing more. It's been left to the school buildings to solve these problems. It's been left to principals to reach out and do their best to find a partner and talk with them. And with PPS's constant shuffling of principals, Atkinson has had 4 principals in the last 5 years. That's hard too. When principals are moved to other buildings, how can you build a community within that building, period? And I see that we're going to open 2 middle schools. Whose principals are we going to lose to lead those new middle schools? I think there is this domino effect we're about to see that this doesn't even begin to address, let alone the immediate changes.
Thank you, Harmony. Yeah, it's interesting how we've done a lot more PLC work set across buildings, and that it interesting when the necessity required us to do something differently, and we've had some really great things happening in collaboration. Thank you for sharing. The others, April Brewer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. So I have a child who is in 5th grade neighborhood at Bridger Elementary, or K through 8. And I will say, I've been following along this process from the beginning. And I will say that there was a large concern from the majority of the students in our class when the initial springboard came out and we were going to be separated from the other middle school or kids in our grade that are in the Spanish program, separating from them, and then we would be going to Madison and they would be going to Franklin. And so I will say that I would like to say that there's a relief among our students and our families and our class that we are now feeding back into Franklin, which was what we had initially thought. The current concern that I have right now is what happens to our middle school neighborhood kids. I feel like we're getting overlooked. There's not a lot of us, but it feels like the current plan, as I understand it, is that Bridger Middle School goes to Kellogg and the Spanish immersion goes to Kellogg, and the neighborhood kids would go to Harrison Park. And so my current concern really is just the fact that we're not keeping those kids together. They may be in different language classes, but these kids play sports together. They play on the playgrounds together. They are friends with each other. Yeah, I'm just really concerned that we're getting overlooked with this situation. And so I would just like to give a voice to the middle school families that are at Bridger neighborhood.
Thank you, April. Others?
Hi. Sorry, there's a lot of feedback going on. I don't know why. This might be prohibitive.
You want to try again?
Yeah, I mean, I know I've been really kind of obnoxious and vocal in the chat, and I don't tend to see myself as an obstructionist, but I feel so saddened by this process. I am baffled. why PPS would decide to roll something out like this in the manner they have when our students have been learning at home, our families are struggling to bring groceries into the house. This proposal would have students, many students, returning to a different school that they were sent home from, to a different building, different teachers, different students. I really feel like this is callous. It's insensitive.
And that's where my emotion is coming from. And that's where
the feedback's coming from in the room, but I'm appalled. This is child-centered, but the way you're behaving is trauma forming for people. Why would you do such a thing? I don't understand. It's appalling. Thank you.
And I'm just gonna say, I know it's like, I don't want Michael to take the brunt of all of this. I think he's just our facilitator. And I don't know, I'd be curious to know how other people would think that this process could go better, because we do have a phase 2. Principals were asked to send it out to their communities to get 2 parents to be a part of the coalition and kind of be a communicator and a liaison between the community and like what the desire is for their community and the coalition. And like I said, we've gone through like 20 editions of this. And I agree, it's a really hard time, and that's been brought up by the coalition for all of these changes. And then I think as the district, like Michael said, we have a $40 or $60 million building sitting there needing kids to go to it. And I think it's just really hard to make all these changes, especially during this time. And at the same time, they still have to be made. And so it's like a really tough spot for everyone to be in, for all of us and for our kids. That's who I'm worried about, is our at the end of the day.
But I would say that not all these changes need to be made now. Kellogg is your priority. If Harrison Park becomes a middle school, you need a second comprehensive middle school, fine, that's it. Separate your K-8s into 6-8s and K-5s and call it a day until we can all come together and have a real discussion about this. And honestly, the outcry from the community is really telling.
Are you thinking, Jade, so just do, and is it okay if we're having this conversation?
Sure, that's what, this is supposed to be a dialogue.
Jade, are you thinking or suggesting, I'm just thinking aloud with you, so just look at the feeder patterns for Kellogg and the feeder patterns for, I guess, Harrison Park, even though it's in 2 years from now, and then going back and looking at boundaries and thinking about DLI programs?
Absolutely, because that seems, what I'm reading on the PPS website for the enrollment balancing, that is what the directive, the rework directive for 2020 because of the pandemic is. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like to alleviate all this stress that we are all under, I mean, honestly, this has eaten up the last month and a half of my life, and I need to be working and I need to be helping my kids, and no one needs this now.
Michael, can I speak real quick?
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Abby Houston. I'm a parent of 3 kids in the district. 2 go to Glencoe. And I just wanted to bring up, I know that we've been talking a lot and I've been listening a lot about the ways that this ill-proposed plan has not gathered the communication or the input of all of us. And I just want to say Glencoe as an elementary neighborhood school has completely been left out of phase 1, and we have not had even a seat at the table. So I'll just say that from our entire neighborhood school, the idea that we would have our neighborhood program split into 2, one of my daughters would lose half of her neighborhood friends who would then be fed into Kellogg and Franklin, and that leaves the other half of us to go to Mount Tabor and then head on to Madison. I'm not necessarily opposed to a plan that takes my kids eventually to Madison High School. I hope that there's a lot of growth that can happen in the community to bolster up these programs and to be student-centered and to maintain program balancing. But I just want to echo that it feels really like the rug has been pulled out from under our community's feet, that we weren't even offered a seat at the original discussion table when so much of this directly affects our community and our neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you, Abby.
Yeah, and Abby, I would say too that as a coalition member, PPS did not really provide feedback when people were making suggestions, whether something was in scope or out of scope. And, you know, there were times that I was asking, can we look at this? And instead of just saying yes or no, I just would not get a response. And it was super frustrating. So some people were just creating scenarios and submitting them, and some moved forward and some did not. And the whole process was very frustrating.
Thanks, Carissa.
Others? Misha just put in the chat, what was the original springboard proposal, and as I think she said, there's probably been at least there's been probably about 20 different things been put forward. So.
I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot tonight, but this idea of locating the DLI programs out closer to where the native speakers live. I am just wondering where the data is for that, because a lot of the Chinese families that Shuren has spoken to really oppose this. They want to stay at Woodstock. They do not want these programs out where they live, wherever that may be. And I know there's a concentration out there in the Jade District, but and if that is the case, and you opened Harrison Park as a Mandarin DLI 4 years ago, that lottery is still limited to Harrison Park neighborhood families. Why is that lottery, if you feel that there is a need out there, why is that lottery not open to all PPS and see if they come, if you open it up, as opposed to putting everyone at Bridger? Because right now at Harrison Park, as far as I understand, I was looking at the staff list, there is a 4th grade class, there is a combined 2-3 class, and a combined K1 class. That's pretty small. And if you opened up a lottery to the whole district, see who would come to Harrison Park or wherever this second Mandarin program is located.
So Jade, the quick answer, and just I know I'm trying to leave it open, is that there was only space for one strand, and it was about keeping it in the neighborhood. It has been and still continues to be a very full school. So adding students from outside the neighborhood was not possible, at least at this point, that was not possible.
But now if you make it if you have a K5, 6, 8, then there will be room.
Sure, that could be some of the considerations for sure. Yeah, as a K8, it was too full. I want to recognize that Peter Bellotta.
Thanks, Michael.
Sorry, messing up your last name. I know who you are too. My apologies.
That's okay. I know that whenever there's change like this, for every family in any school district change, it's a very traumatic process. My family will be affected by this, but I also know the tremendous amount of work that has been put in by coalition members, and they've looked at lots of scenarios. And I just want to say I appreciate what those of you who have participated in the process have done, and Michael and all the other administrators that have been involved. In the end, if my kids have to move, I will move them, and I will go to the school where they will move to, and I will work to make that school better. Or do whatever I can to be supportive.
Thank you, Peter. Others?
What type of engagement have you guys seen from some of the more underserved sections of our community? I'm concerned that a lot of the online things that are available right now. In my work, I see it that a lot of people who cannot access online activities just don't and are not getting healthcare, which is my sector. And I'm worried that that's also limiting the involvement in chats like this, that we may absolutely not be hearing from people who really need to be heard because we're having this conversation in a time when we can't even be in person. And can we do the smallest change like Jade is suggesting, wait until we can be in person so that people can come when there's childcare available in the other room and have a conversation like adults.
Yeah, thank you, Amelia. We certainly have had listening sessions last night, specifically reaching out to different groups. I also know that there's been direct phone call surveys, intentionally reaching out to families who might not have historically participated as much and so forth. But I certainly think we can always do better. And I think continue to work on that. And certainly current circumstances prohibit us from having that big general or having everybody come to a school or gather and having childcare. So certainly those are things we need to take forward. So I don't know, David, I just want to be cognizant of the time because we're close to 8 o'clock. I know that we all have a lot going on in our lives. I think it's ending at 8. I don't know if they're going to close our rooms for us, but is there any other people who haven't had an opportunity to share that would like to share something into the space that offer?
So, Michael, can I ask, one of the issues that came up during the coalition process is that Mount Tabor is the smallest middle school in Southeast, right? And we have the Richmond Japanese program feed there, and that's a large program. It has, once it's 4 strands in the K-5, and then by the time some students drop out, it's 3 strands at Mount Tabor. But that school gets very crowded with the other 2 neighborhood schools feeding into it, especially if the other 2 neighborhood schools are adequately enrolled. So how can we address that issue? Because I raised this question several times during the coalition process, and no one from PPS was interested in answering it.
Yep, so it sounds like that's one we need to take back. I hear you. I know not all questions have been answered. So it's the Mount Tabor specifically about the enrollment. It is you are right. I looked at that data. It is our smallest.
Yeah, and it's overcrowded. And Harrison Park, if it is going to become a middle school, it needs enrollment. And I really want to see PPS start to focus on what we can do to make our neighborhood schools strong. We have a lot of focused option schools and a lot of charter schools around us. I really want us to focus on making our neighborhood schools strong, and I want our neighborhood schools that feed into Mount Tabor to have adequate enrollment.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that? Are you talking about adequate enrollment in terms of changing the boundaries like for Vestal so they absorb more kids that will then feed into Tabor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if whatever neighborhood schools are going to feed into Mount Tabor, that they should have at least, adequately enrolled, without fluctuations, for 2 to 3 grade strands. And Vestal really has really low enrollment, and the scenario that's being proposed, that I don't really think that addresses their enrollment issues. But yet again, if you increase their boundary to try and improve their enrollment, or if you take some of it away from Glencoe, then you're starting to eat into Glencoe's enrollment. And you look out at the 2024 projections for these schools, Well, the K-5 student population is going down in our areas, right? All throughout Southeast. And so it becomes more and more of an issue as the years go on. And those boundaries need to be adjusted for them to be vital schools, vital neighborhood schools. So how do we fix the boundaries to make sure that those neighborhood schools are sufficiently enrolled? And, you know, if there's going to be some other school or program that feeds there, just making sure that Mount Tabor is not overcrowded.
Carissa, do I hear
I
you?
had a
Sorry, it's
question.
Abby again. Carissa, do I hear you just recommending or asking that the coalition look at shifting Richmond's pathway to free up more neighborhood space for Mount Tabor Middle School kids so that maybe possibly the Glencoe neighborhood could not be split in half? Because I don't know if that's exactly what you're saying, but that's something that I would really love the coalition to look at so that, again, this neighborhood program that was left out of phase 1 considerations not be completely displaced by this entire process. And I just want to echo, I appreciate Carissa bringing that up. Thank you.
So thank you, Abby. I think that's something we definitely need to bring back and in the Glencoe representation table. Obviously, if it's impacting, we want to have a voice at the table. So I do want to respect that we are just past our time. So I don't see this is the end of the opportunities to give feedback. There is the survey. Go to the website. Please share your feedback. As David has said as well, all of this is recorded, the chat is recorded. I know that the work of the team that is managing this will go through and clearly compile those. I think we will look to have answers to those. I don't believe it'll be directly to each individual, but we will put those into the FAQ that's ongoing and look for those responses. And if you don't see them, you can talk to a coalition member. You can certainly reach out to and complete on the survey and ask those questions. Please don't hesitate to do that. And I really sincerely, I do appreciate, and I know there's some really challenging, difficult issues and hard for us all to deal with. But I do know that we do have to make we have that Kellogg thing, we have to do that. So I know that that's what we're trying to grapple with, and there's a lot in here, a lot to unpack, and I appreciate your time and I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share your opinions and try to do right by this. I know there will not be 100% satisfaction, and there will be always lingering concerns and challenges we have, but I appreciate the engagement and all of you being here this evening. So thank you very much. Please stay engaged and please continue to share. All right, thank you very much.